All right. All right. Welcome, everyone. This is our special meeting for proposed zoning adjustments. This is our public hearing, and may we have a roll call?
Mr. Dutcher. Here. Ms. Cheney. Absent. Mr. Fisher.
Here.
Mr. Knipp.
Here.
Ms. Snyder.
Here.
Mr. Van Mark.
Here.
We have a motion to excuse Ms. Cheney.
Motion to excuse Ms. Cheney. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Presuming everyone's had an opportunity to review the agenda for this evening, are there any additions we need to make? And if not, do I have a motion to accept the agenda?
Motion to accept the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. I do not see that we have anyone registered to speak. Is that the case? Everyone's?
We do not.
All right. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Donnellan to discuss the proposed zoning changes. Give us a briefing on that, please.
Thank you. This is a formality of making an amendment to the zoning and land usage code. Planning Commission undertook a review, comprehensive review over several months of the code and then made a recommendation to council. Our next step is this public hearing. If council accepts the recommendation, it goes forward on the agenda for legislation. The purpose for updating the code when we started down was twofold. One, Planning Commission has been hearing fence variances a couple times a year, and they were always rear yard. And so we came to the conclusion, maybe we need to update the code rather than always doing a variance for higher fence in the rear yard. At the same time, Mr. Putoff was recommending we update a portion of the code because of zoning permits. People are not getting zoning permits to do their work, and therefore there was no inspection. And we actually had one resident who did not get a zoning permit and had some faulty work, but we couldn't really help them at that point. So what we were looking at relative to the zoning permit was the permit requirement is anything going vertical, which is easy. You're building an addition on your house, doing it, you get a zoning permit. Where we're having a problem is horizontal, driveways, patios, sidewalks. So one of the gaps in our zoning code was not clearly defining a structure being anything you build, including a driveway, sidewalk, or patio. So what we did was update our definitions, recognizing that there are driveways for private residents, there are driveways access, which would be typically your commercial, and then clarifying that these are considered structures under the code. So we added language. Structures include driveways, parking pads, parking areas, and patios. What that'll do is someone has to come in here and get a zoning permit. They don't have to get a building permit downtown, they need a zoning permit from us. And that gives Mr. Putoff the opportunity to inspect the work. And then going into the inspection of the work was setting what the standard would be. What do we require for the apron coming off the street? What do we require for the sidewalk portion that crosses a driveway? What do we require for the driveway itself? So that our residents would know what quality construction would be. So first was updating the definitions for driveways, updating definitions for sidewalks. And then later, one of the amendments was to acknowledge the standard for sidewalk inspection construction. That if we find a defective sidewalk, we give a notice to do the work, we give a notice of violation and an opportunity for them to correct it. The standards which we adopted are very typical construction standards. Matt Scott on our planning commission is in the business, and he went through with us as to what typically is required on the depth for a concrete sidewalk, a concrete driveway, what type of concrete is required. We're not going to a strict, highway construction standard. What we're doing is going to a standard where we feel comfortable that person's driveway is going to be there for year after year after year after year. In doing that, we define how wide a driveway can be, how wide the apron can be. And then when you do that, we wanted to define how much of the front yard could be covered, because we didn't want folks putting in very large driveways and we wind up with a concrete front yard. So those were some of the definitions we updated: minimum lot area, minimum lot frontage, both in the Residence A and Residence B, that the minimum lot is an 8,000 square foot lot. That's typical of the Gulf Manor size lot. So we updated all of that in the code. And then we turned our attention to fences. And again, we're willing to permit a 6 foot high fence in the rear, not in the front, but in the rear. And then where that fence may turn and face the public street, we wanted to make sure that we didn't have a monstrosity there. So what we did was if you want to go 6 feet in front, then it has to be at least 25% of it be decorative topping, like an open shadow box or anything. We had multiple examples that we showed up here with the recommendation too, that when we adopt this, the administration would put into the code examples of what we consider to be a decorative fence topper. And then when someone wants to put a fence in like that, they don't have to go through the long variance process with approval from all their neighbors, notices, public hearings. They simply come in administratively, show what they want to do on their fence. We don't have to necessarily turn them down immediately, but we can suggest to them what they need to do for that front gate or that front facing of the fence. We also wanted to consider that when you come through a backyard and you come up to the back of the house, some of the houses are set up in such a way that if the neighbor builds that fence, they're now coming down what is your side yard, what may be your bedroom window, what may be your kitchen window. So again, when you get to that back building line, that's when it has to be 4 feet or it has to have a decorative top, so that the neighbors see something aesthetic and not a big stockade fence. That's pretty much what we did. We clarified that split rail fences are permitted. We clarified that with a split rail fence, you could put in some type of chain link to keep the dogs in place, but clarified what fences are prohibited. So you can't have an electric fence. You can't have a fence that's a dangerous fence. But what this will do is eliminate a lot of the hearings the Planning Commission holds every year on folks wanting to put in a backyard fence, typically because they have animals. They want the animal to jump out. And I don't think we've ever heard one where the neighbors opposed it, ever. So this gives us a little freedom.
It's saving the residents the fees they'd need to be paying to have that variance, right? About how much was that, were they being charged for that?
I think it was a couple $100 because a lot of it was the advertising cost.
Yeah.
So we had to put it in the Inquirer. We had to notify the neighbors.
Which was reduced from, what, 2 or 3 years ago? We
It was
reduced from
$450.
Yeah.
initially.
So just a, I don't think I heard it all. Basically, they can do a 6-foot fence from the front of their house.
From the back of their house, all the way through their backyard on both sides and on the rear lot line.
And then on the side of their house, it has to be 40 feet.
It has to be 4 feet. And again, where it comes up and may turn to connect to the house and it faces the street, that's when we want 4 foot or something decorative if you're gonna go above 4 feet.
Down to violation.
I'd like to either
A
during
split rail's probably
this
4.5 to 5.
meeting or if it gets passed along to full council, pull this whiteboard up in front of the camera and kind of sketch out what we're talking about. Because I know for some folks, it's hard to kind of conceptualize what we're talking about, what's going to now be allowed to be 6 feet relative to what the house is. So
Yeah.
there's a motion to do that now. I can go back there and grab it, ask Mr. Crusoe's help with that, or we can do it during the full council meeting.
So we have another hearing at 6:45.
All right. So I'll wait till the full council meeting if this gets passed along.
What needs to happen to pass it along?
Make a recommendation to pass this to the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
So Mr. Pridnoff is taking our minutes this evening, so take a breath, let him catch up.
Who was the second? Who made the first motion?
Mr. Betcher. 2 T's.
CHER.
Yeah.
It's helpful. I got the caption right there. Okay.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
I appreciate you catching it. You saw it in the minutes. There was not in there, so I appreciate that. Very good. Okay.
Right. Any other business?
Until our 6:45 budget hearing.
So we'll
do we
go
have
ahead and
a-
adjourn this and
Yes.
we'll open the next one at 6:45.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Do we have the ability to call up on the